Hello class, today we're going to be taking notes. The next section of our text is Civil War photographs. So with this image collection by Matthew Brady, Alexander Gardner, and Andrew J. Russell, we're going to be looking at the concept of photojournalism and analyzing photos in relation to written text, which is something we've done a form of in the past, but this will be a little bit different. So the essential question for this unit is what divides us as human beings? Which you should know, the Civil War obviously was a huge division between the North and the South in the United States. So making connections. In this lesson, you will examine photographs taken during the Civil War and make connections between them and other materials related to the topic. One way of making connections is to link what you are reading or seeing to your background knowledge or to other texts that you've read. So what you're going to be doing is you're looking at these photos and you're making personal connections or world connections or connections to the text that we've read in class, for example, that are from the same period and deal with the same issues. And from there, I will show you a resource for this, but you're really just trying to figure out, okay, these photos were taken with a particular reason or purpose in mind. Are they effective or aren't they? Now, you can also relate a text to the world at large, meaning the world that's happening around us. So things that are happening currently or in the recent past, in the last 10, 15 years. To do this, you think about what you know about the Civil War or other texts that you've read on the subject, like what we've read so far. Now, as you view the photographs, make connections between them and what you already know, and think about what they add to your understanding of the topic. So in the past, we've talked about text to self, text to text, text to world. These are the connections you make between what you're reading or looking at with yourself, what you're looking at or reading versus another text that you've read or seen, and a text to world, obviously what you're reading or looking at versus what's happened in the world, okay? We've talked about these connections before. You should have talked about them in 9th and 10th grade and even as early as elementary school, to be completely honest with you. But these connections don't go away. We just build them up. Now, continuing from the last slide, you may also have questions about what you're looking at. If you see something in the photograph that relates or conflicts with what you already know about the Civil War, and that's fine, just like you would if you were reading something that's written, a written text. You're going to write down any questions that occur to you while you're doing your viewing, right? You should be asking questions when you're looking at photographs or artwork, sculptures, paintings, etc. Genre elements of photojournalism. They include still images, documents events of historical significance, and conveys a message through subject and composition. Photojournalism is actually something you can study in university. It's a real thing. People still do it. I actually, one of my housemates in college, my junior year, was a photojournalism major. And what it more or less entails is telling stories or documenting history through photographs. So we get pieces of this, obviously, as soon as the camera was invented. But the first real time, the camera was invented at some point, I don't know the year, so please forgive me, but it was invented during the Civil War. So the ability to take photos was so new that they were just sort of experimenting with, okay, what can we do with these photos? What is our purpose behind it? And what they ended up doing, which is where these photos that we're going to look at come from, is documenting what was there. Photojournalism today is no different. Photojournalists are the ones that take the photos for the newspaper or magazine articles. And they do sometimes write the articles, but they're not always the same person. Typically, the person taking the photographs is not the same person that is writing the article. But if you are a photojournalism major, if that's something that interests you, you will be taught how to do both. So, analyzing media effectiveness. The Civil War photographs produced by Matthew Brady and the others were intended to reveal the terrible realities of the conflict to an audience that tended to romanticize war. When we're talking about romanticizing war, we're talking about viewing war as this great thing, like it's such an honor to fight and die in a war for your country, for example, which is a thought process that still exists today, which is why you'll hear people, we've talked about this in the past, right? Some of you would be willing to fight and die for your country, even though you have never even lived in that country. But the idea during this time was, if my son, because daughters could not fight in wars, if my son would go and fight and die, he's a martyr, right? Even for these people, he was a martyr, and he would die with such great honor and give purpose to his life. And they didn't see, oh, I might not die in the war, I might just lose all my limbs, meaning both your arms and your legs, or I might come back blind, or I might come back disfigured, in some other way. So these photographers were trying to show, no, war is vicious. These people are losing limbs. They're not just being shot and dying. They're being shot and living for 3 days in agonizing pain and then dying, if they die. And keep in mind, we're not going to read we won't read any of these really, but you can find journals from doctors during this time of people that literally went crazy trying to fix these soldiers once they came back from war, because people were shooting one another and they didn't know how to deal with that. All right, so the photos were important to soldiers who did not want to burden family members with battlefield descriptions in their letters, and to families who desperately wanted information about their loved ones. So it's two-sided. The soldiers didn't want to talk about what they were seeing. Okay, it's the early signs of PTSD. They just couldn't bear to discuss it. And the families wanted to know, like, what's going on? Like, where is my loved one? What are they experiencing? Are they alive? Because, you can't just send a text message. It's snail mail at best, and that could take months to get back to from a battlefield to a loved one. The photographs printed in newspapers and magazines motivated civilian efforts to send relief supplies to those who were fighting. I don't know a better way to put this. The idea, or the reality, I should say, of soldiers running out of supplies during a war is not something that's unusual. It happened in the Civil War. It happened in the Revolutionary War, which was before that. It happened in World War I with more armies than our own. It happened in World War II. We have to motivate people to donate things like metal to build guns, or to make guns, or in World War II to build rockets. They have to donate clothes let's clothe our army, right? Cans of food to, feed the army so they don't starve to death. Because just fighting the battle is only one part of this. You also need supplies for basic necessities to keep your soldiers alive. So yeah, we're posting photographs, and this is something that still happens today, and I'm sure you'll find many examples of this, where we put these photographs out there to appeal to people so that they give us something in return. Now, photojournalists communicate the significant details and broad context of a story through a selection of subjects and composition. Subjects are the central figures of the photograph, and composition is the arrangement of visual elements. And you can see in the picture to the left, there's these kind of weird lines through here. These pictures were strategically taken so that certain objects are the focal point and certain objects are composed in the background, so to speak, okay? Photographers strategically set their shots up to draw attention to certain things. Now, I can give you more examples of this from the Great Depression, but I will do that in a later unit, so I'm going to withhold. But you can find many photos that were deliberately set up to appeal to people's emotions, to make them want to donate or to see how bad a cause was. However, Civil War cameras could not capture motion. These photographs on the left are all still photographs, but you've obviously seen photographs of people moving, especially World War II would be the biggest one. But in the Civil War, the cameras had just been invented. They weren't advanced enough to catch motion, so photographers were limited to photographing their subjects before and after battle, and this is exactly what they did. They took before and after shots. Scenes from camps, prisons, hospitals, and the aftermath of battles, including the dead bodies, were typical settings for these photographs. So as you look through the 4 photographs we're going to analyze, think about the choices the photographer made and the ideas conveyed through the images. For example, what message is the photographer sending? Who is the intended audience? And how might those people, how might those people perceive the photographs? And are the photographs effective? Meaning, do they get the purpose across? Do they work or don't they work? If not, what would make them more powerful? All right, so that's it, but I do want to take a second and show you this. This is a chart that's going to help you fill out, kind of walk through these questions. You will do the close readings for these pictures sometime next week, but you're also going to fill out a chart that looks like this. So there are 4 photos, and for each photo, you're going to try to identify the photographer's message, the audience perception, so how is it seen by the audience, and then the effectiveness. Did the photographer's message be correctly received by the audience? Like, did they actually get their message across or no? Okay, so I'll post this chart in Google Classroom with the activity next week, but just to give you an idea, that's how you're going to do it. So for each photo, you'll look at the photo, you'll try to identify the message. What was the photographer trying to do? What was the message they were trying to send? As an audience, how are you receiving this message? Looking at it, like, what are you actually thinking about it? And then the effectiveness, does it get the photographer's message across, whatever you identified in this first box, or does it not? Okay? So that's all you're going to do. I hope you guys have a great day and have a great weekend, and see you next week.